This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and here's one of the ones you've been waiting for. This is the Lenovo Yoga 3 Pro. The latest evolution. In some ways, it's way ahead of its time. It's incredibly thin. It's incredibly light. I mean, wow, this is skinny. It has a very unusual watch band hinge. It's got the new Intel Core M CPU inside. That's a 5th generation CPU in here. The one thing that didn't go up so much is performance. We're going to check that out now. Well, I know a lot of you have been waiting for this, the refresh of the Lenovo Yoga Pro series. Last year it was the Yoga 2 Pro that we reviewed. Hard not to say Yoga Toe if you say that fast. Now we have the Lenovo Yoga 3 Pro right here, and it has gotten incredibly slimmer. And you know, the last generation was not exactly what you'd call chunky or heavy either. It was 3.06 pounds, fairly slim. This guy right here, it does feel like the future. I have to say, it is so skinny. It's just amazing. If you were to use this in tablet mode, it actually would feel sort of tablet-y as a 13.3-inch laptop goes. In fact, from the side here, you can see there's no ports right along the front edge over here. Of course, it's always in the bottom section right there where all the ports have to be, because there's simply not enough room to fit ports over there. Interesting premise right there. The entire laptop, half an inch thick. That's all, 12.7 millimeters for those of you who speak metric. So one of the skinniest, certainly, and it's only 2.6 pounds. Samsung came up with a couple of models that were just about as light back in the old day without touchscreens. Touchscreens are heavier, so that's with a touchscreen. It's pretty darned impressive. Because it is a Yoga, it does, of course, the Yoga hinge thing. Now notice the hinge. See how skinny that is, right? It's almost terrifyingly petite, delicate, whatever you want to call it. Also shiny. Cameras and your eyes might actually have a little trouble focusing when the light glints off it. It's their watch band design, they call it, and it does indeed look like a highly jeweled watch band. Do you love it? Do you hate it? That one's up to you. I will admit that it is different. It is eye-catching. Probably people in stores will be drawn to it just because it is so unique. So instead of the tried and true 2 hinges that we saw on the Yoga 2 Pro and also on ThinkPad Yoga models, we have effectively what are 6 hinges now. Now, 800 moving parts, Lenovo said at one point, 800 parts in this. What could go wrong, right? I don't know. It worries me a little bit, especially because it's so skinny, but Lenovo is known for making very durable and sturdy products. So there's a point to it besides just trying to look different here and be Ashton Kutcher influenced perhaps, since he's their new product ambassador. They said that these 6 hinges reduce the amount of screen bounce, which is handy with a touch screen. You know, you tap on them, they bounce. Well, it does still bounce. It is a bit firmer, though, than a lot of other models that are available. Because it's a Yoga, it does this. It does this. It does that. And of course, you can use it like a tablet. No pen option here, no active digitizer like on the Lenovo ThinkPad Yoga 12.5-inch model. You can use a capacitive stylus, not the most fulfilling experience because you don't get palm rejection. Your palm's going to write when you write. That sort of thing, not very precise, but it will work. And again, given how light it is, it's less of a burden. You know, it makes a difference. You drop a half a pound, say, compared to the ThinkPad Yoga 12.5-inch model, and this does become something that is easier to hold, even though this is a bigger footprint, being 13.3 inches. The display on here, that was another issue with the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. It had a lovely 3200 by 1800 QHD plus display. It was a Samsung PLS panel, and the one drawback was when it wasn't plugged into power, electricity, you know, to save juice, yellows kind of look mustardy green. Not so here. This is still a Samsung panel. It's a different model number. The revision number has gone up, and I can tell you that definitely it looks better. Let's do our SpongeBob test, because that's always a good test, and see how SpongeBob looks. So there's a whole lot of SpongeBobs. We are not plugged into power, no cords right here, and SpongeBob looks the appropriate yellow. He no longer looks kind of mustardy or green or anything like that, like he did on the Yoga 2 Pro when it was unplugged. So good to see that. Still a sharp and beautiful display. Very good color gamut on here. The usual 95% of sRGB, 75% of Adobe RGB. That's right up there with top panels. Brightness 300 nits, that's also pretty good. We've seen higher, but generally we've seen a lot more that are lower. 300 nits is good enough to combat brightness, but it's a glary, glossy panel, as you can see right here. It reflects like mad. Well, that is what it is. Black levels are decent on this, not super stellar, but honestly the sharpness on this, and by the way, by default Windows machines with this kind of resolution usually ship with 200% scaling, which functionally makes it like a 1600 by 900 resolution here for the desktop. So things are easy enough to see and touch, at least as Windows desktop goes. Really still not completely optimized for touch, but things are sharp and clear enough. There's no fuzzy text. Now, if you want to try to squeeze even more on screen, you can do that, but at some scaling resolutions, things don't look quite as sharp. Of course, for programs that still haven't been updated to handle DPI scaling the way Windows 8.1 does, you might still run into some tiny text. And if you try to run this at its native resolution, get a magnifying glass. I mean, things are ultra crazy, super small. You don't really want to do that. Everything in Metro Live Tile Land, of course, always scales very well. Microsoft did a good job there, and apps from the App Store followed the convention, so they all behave nicely and are very viewable there. I'm still not sold on needing such a super duper high resolution display, but once Lenovo introduced that with the Yoga 2 Pro, they kind of didn't want to go back on it. And some people feel that in some ways they might have gone back when it comes to the processor on this fella. What we have in here is a thin machine. Notice there's no vent over here anymore. They don't need it. It still does have a fan. There is a fan in here. When you plug it in, particularly, you'll hear it if you're going to be working on HD video exports or trying to play some games. You'll hear it kick in. It's not obnoxious. It's not crazy loud, but it's there. But what they've done right here is it put the Intel 5th generation, what was called the Broadwell Y series CPU in here. For those of you who know about the naming conventions that Intel uses, Y usually means the lowest power, good for tablets, not super ultra budget tablets. Those are still the Atom tablets of the world, but low power consumption devices. And here's where I think maybe Lenovo could have done it better. Not that there's anything wrong with this product, but there's a lot of expectations with anything that has Pro in the name, and given the Yoga 2 Pro and what it meant, if they'd called this the Yoga Slim or something like that, I think people would have been a lot more receptive. Because once you think about that Y series CPU in here, you feel like you might be giving something up. But the benchmarks say that actually it's not doing so bad. It does get a little warm over here, by the way. You can feel some warmth right here if you're holding it, but it actually has enough oomph. It's kind of between an Intel Core i3 and i5 for the 4th generation Haswell CPUs. What it's doing right here, this guy is allowing for better battery life. That's how they got to make it so thin. That's another thing you could say, well, maybe we should have had a Yoga 3 Pro and a Yoga 3 Slim, because we could have had the same capacity battery as we did in the Yoga 2 Pro, but instead they reduced it so they could make this crazy thin and light machine here. So by reducing it and using a more power efficient CPU, what you have is the same battery life that you had on the Yoga 2 Pro. Again, we're not moving up in that department. So around 6 hours. If you're pushing it harder, it might be 5.5. If you've got really serious power management going on and trying not to use power, you might go to 6.5, but call it around a 6 hour for average productivity use kind of laptop. So let's do a real world performance test here before we get into the synthetic benchmark numbers. Here we have Chrome, which is kind of the pig of browsers. Sorry, it's a nice browser, but it tends to use more memory and resources than other browsers. You can see I have quite a few tabs open here. Some of them are fairly heavy pages. Here's our own home page. That's not too heavy. We got the New York Times. We have CNN going over here as well. That's a heavy page with lots of stuff playing on here. Microsoft's home page. Simple Google, that's not going to weigh us down. And here we have YouTube and our channel. And for those of you who want to see how it plays, say we're going to go up to, really make it work, full HD here. And we'll play that video. And we'll leave it just going quietly so you can tell whether it's stuttering or not. We'll switch over here. We'll load this page. Big old ad, takes resources. There times, let's load article. Notice the audio is not stuttering at all on the original YouTube video. Playing just fine. There are two schools of thought when it comes to Ultrabook. Some people think they should be as small and light as possible. Then there are those people who want something slim and light, but they want. So I know that's one of those tests that a lot of you worry about, having a browser open with a lot of tabs and HD video playing in the background. Obviously, it's handling that just fine. This is not a slug of a machine. Really, the only thing I can say is people may be disappointed because it's not faster than the Yoga 2 Pro. And to speak about Intel's roadmap for CPUs, if you remember Ivy Bridge 3rd generation going to 4th generation Haswell, there was no performance gain there either. It was about improving battery life and dropping down clock speeds while getting better performance. The same thing is true going into Broadwell, largely, at least for this Y series CPU. And for another real world test, this is Adobe Photoshop 6 here. If you'll notice, the menu headings do not handle the scaling well right there. This is in Photoshop CC, this is Photoshop 6. But the actual menu text, thank God, is legible once you deal with these teeny tools over here. It's not too bad. So we're going to open up a RAW file from an SD card taken from a full-frame digital SLR. So we're talking a pretty ample size image. All right, so here we have a 20 meg RAW file right here, and we're going to apply a filter to it because filters usually are the most demanding things, and we'll try doing a ripple effect first. Plenty quick enough. And let's do something else to it. Let's do a unsharp mask. We'll go with the defaults right there. So the speed's just fine, and so we want to resize the image. And instead of 5,000 pixels, we want to go to 500. Just that fast. Zoom in. It's quite usable. Okay, so let's get to the synthetic benchmarks now that you've seen some real-world use cases. So our review unit has the one and only Intel Core M. This is the M-5Y70 CPU. 1.1 gigahertz is the base clock rate, but it goes to 2.7 gigahertz for turbo boost. So there it's actually a little bit higher than the Core i5 we see in Haswell machines. So that's not bad at all right there. 8 gigs of RAM. The RAM is soldered on board with this, so you're not going to get any more RAM with it. So the benchmark numbers for PC Mark 7, it scored 4,673. Usually we see, around that, up to about 5,000 perhaps for the Core i7 in Haswell. So that's not actually bad at all. And this is a production shipping machine. This is not a pre-release machine. This did come from Lenovo as a review loaner, but final product right here. So if you've seen some early reviews that might have had pre-release BIOS, something like that, this might explain the differences right there. For 3D Mark Ice Storm Unlimited, and that's 3D Mark Pro, the latest version, for Ice Storm Unlimited, 38,369, respectable number. CloudGate, 3376. For 3D Mark 11, for the performance mode at 720p, it scored 714. Meh, that's all right. We see up to 900 sometimes with Intel HD 4400 graphics. This has Intel HD 5300 graphics. Now, Intel has to go up in the numbers. So this does not mean that this is better than Intel Iris 5100 graphics. It's simply just a new lineup here, a new series for 5th generation. So it's the new equivalent, say, for the HD 4400 graphics, only now on the Broadwell platform. W prime, it computed pi in 24.8 seconds. That's not bad. We see anywhere from about 22 to 28 normally with a Core i5. Geekbench 3, single core, 2557, multi-core, 4600. Again, maybe 100, 200 points lower than a Core i5 when you're talking a score that's in the thousands. That's not so hideous. So is this a slow machine? No, it's not. It's, again, somewhere between the Core i3 and Core i5 for the Haswell 4th generation and much closer to the Core i5. That said, once in a while I feel like I can bog it down a little bit when I've got 10 tabs open in Internet Explorer, which is more well behaved than Chrome is, and I've got MS Office 2013 open and I got a video playing, that sort of thing. Just a little bit. Like web pages don't render quite as snappily as they do on my Core i5 Haswell machines, but fine point there. Not a cheap machine. But you start with a 256 gig SSD for the base model rather than the usual 128, and that is an M2 gumstick shaped drive. It is replaceable if you open up the bottom on this, unlike the RAM, which is soldered on. The wireless card, of course, is also socketed. So 256 gig SSD in here, and that machine is priced at $1,379. So it's more expensive, isn't it, than the Yoga 2 Pro, which started out a bit cheaper. Now, by the time Best Buy starts shipping these, maybe they're going to have some sales for Black Friday. Who knows? But right now, that's the pricing. If you want to go up to 512 gig SSD, everything else stays the same. Just that's the only change there. It's $1,749. So you're paying a lot for the kind of nifty looks, the incredible thin build quality, and your 800 moving parts right here in your Hinge. Now, for those of you who have a mind for style and you don't think silver is too exciting, there is, as ever, the clementine orange, which is pretty nifty. Of course, the Hinge is going to stand out a bit more there visually, and there's a new champagne gold color coming. If you do want to take off the bottom on this, you just unscrew a whole bunch of little screws right here, and you can pop off the bottom plate. You have access to the wireless card as well. This has a Broadwell, and I'm not going to complain about that because Broadwell's actually been performing better for Wi-Fi cards lately. Dual band Wi-Fi AC card in here, so that's good news. And both signal strength and performance in terms of file transfer and speedtest.net test is very good on this. So I was quite happy, no disconnects, no flakiness. Much better starting point than the Yoga 2 Pro, which had only 2.4 gigahertz single band Wi-Fi, so good times there. JBL speakers, 1.5 watts a piece, firing from down here. We'll play them a little bit more so you can hear them. They're not bad at all. Now, looking at the side of the machine here, you can see an SD card does stick out quite a bit, for those of you who are bothered by such things. This is the power connector here. It looks like Lenovo's usual rectangular power connector. It's actually not. It's kind of got a notch on it. It looks like a USB cable. In fact, at the other end of the power adapter, which is not your usual looking power adapter, it's kind of square, it is a regular USB connection here, so you can actually use this to charge other things if you wanted, Lenovo says. You can even swap in a regular USB cable in case you lose it, but this end is a normal USB connection, and the end that goes in here has a notch. Now, this is a dual-purpose port right here. This is a USB 2.0 port as well. We have a 3.0 port right there, micro HDMI. There's just not room for full-size HDMI in something this skinny. Of course, that's our SD card slot. This side right here, a second USB 3.0 port, our combo 3.5 millimeter audio jack. Power button, Lenovo's proud of themselves. They moved it from the edge here. Apparently people pick it up from the front edge and we're turning the machine on and off by accident. And also, it's too darn thin to put anything in front here, isn't it? We've got the little one key recovery here. I'm in trouble SOS button on the side, and that's depressed. So you actually have to try hard to press it. You're not going to get into that by accident or use a paper clip. Be the easiest way to do that. Rotation lock right there, and volume controls, just in case you're using it in tablet mode. That way the controls are available to you on the outside of the machine. So that's all there is to that. Back edge, nothing but the hinge. Front edge, nothing going on there. It does have magnets that help keep it shut. It is pretty stiff. It's one of those two-handed kind of deals. Now, the keyboard deck is kind of neat. It's got this rubbery textured finish on it, very rubbery, stippled rubber right here. Synaptics trackpad, decent size, not super large. I like it, not as well as the ThinkPad models though, but it's a little bit slipperier, and I find you tend to slide around a lot. A little easy to actually swipe in from the left when you didn't mean to, but as trackpads go, not bad. The keys, as you can see, show a little bit of fingerprint oil, nothing that can't be cleaned off. You're going to use the FN key plus the multimedia keys right here. Given the keyboard layout, there's kind of no way around it, I guess, for a Lenovo to do that. Backlighting for the keyboard, you can control it with the FN plus the space bar. It's bright enough here that you're really not going to see it, but lights all around the edges of the keys. They're kind of white right there. And it's such a skinny machine. You don't get a huge amount of travel there, but nicely damped keys. And given how skinny it is, it's actually not that bad a keyboard. Not as nice as a ThinkPad keyboard. Not much is not as nice, I don't think, as the ZenBook UX303 we recently reviewed. That was a bit more tactile, even a little bit more travel, but not too bad. One thing that Lenovo does with their non-ThinkPad line, technically this is still under the IdeaPad umbrella, is they have this row over here. The delete key is next to the backspace key. I find I hit that by accident a lot, and you got the page up, page down, and these guys to the far right. Some of you love that, some of you don't love it. It is what it is. Keyboard does drop down in the tray a little bit to give you a little bit more of an ergonomic typing experience here. And this part of the deck just doesn't show any fingerprints. And the whole thing is pretty rubbery and pretty easy to clean. In terms of the sturdiness of the hinge, it just doesn't flop at all. This is really hard to move. It is indeed a very stiff hinge. Will it be that way a year from now? Well, we'll find out a year from now. Now Lenovo has this little pop-up. Every time you switch modes right there, it can, well, look at everything that you're doing in different modes and make suggestions. I don't know. I don't make much use of it, but that's going to be up to you as to whether you do for each of these. And now for a little gaming plus speaker test at the same time. Speaker volume is set to 58%. It sounds pretty loud and nice and full. So this is Civ 5 with expansion pack on, and we are at 88 turns, so that's the point where things can start to get, you know, pretty bogged down. You can see a little bit of lag there when I'm trying to get my units to take a walk around there. We're going to avoid having a fight with those guys right here. Now here's the interesting thing. We're playing at native resolution here, 3200 by 1800, so crazy that, right? You probably don't want to do that. The thing is that Civ handles scaling really badly, so what you're going to have to do is do something like set the machine's resolution to 1600 by 900 and then run the game at that, or it's going to run in a small window. But the fact that it's running even this decently at that resolution is actually pretty darn amazing. And if we do it at 1600 by 900, it's very playable at that point. So that's the Yoga 3 Pro. What's happened for 2014 obviously is it's gotten a lot thinner and lighter. Battery life's about the same. Performance is just a little bit less than it was for the Yoga 2 Pro, but not wildly, a whole lot less. The display has improved in terms of its ability to actually represent yellows correctly, and all of the colors are gray too. It's a sharp display. It's colorful. It has a nice wide color gamut. Good dual band Wi-Fi, AC inside, ample storage, which you should be getting for that kind of high price tag. And, well, very unique hinge right here. So that's the Yoga 3 Pro. I tend to think of it as the Yoga 3 Slim. So that's the Yoga 3 Pro. It's light enough that I can do this with one hand pretty easily. It can be a tablet. It can be tent mode. Obviously very light and actually fairly usable as these things go as tablets for a 13-inch machine. Like I said, as long as you don't need super duper strong performance here, if you're looking for something that's even faster than the Yoga 2 Pro, that's not it. But if you're just looking for something that's certainly capable for everyday productivity, playing 1080p video is really light and pretty stylish, this is it. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.